Um, Thanks, Jessica. I'm Jeff Loiter. I'm a technical director at NARUC and in the Center for Partnerships Innovation. Thank you for joining us for today's innovation webinar on coordinating federal energy efficiency funding with regulated utility programs. We've got a fantastic panel here, and I think you're going to really love this. Very quickly, I don't want to take up a lot of time. For those of you who may not know NARUC, we represent the state utility regulatory commissions and the commissioners and all their staff throughout the United States. Where our mission is really to serve in the public interest and improve the quality and effectiveness of public regulation. Within NARUC, I'm a part of the Center for Partnerships and Innovation. We are the group that provides technical assistance to our members, and we do that in a lot of ways, including through webinars like this. We conduct trainings, we convene working groups. At the right here is a representation of our fact sheet. That's not an eye test. You can find the current version of that on our website, as well as many, many other resources for you who are interested in public utility regulation. Importantly, we always want to thank, in this case, DOE for funding us to provide this work and these resources to our members. Along the lines of those resources, the Innovation Webinar Series is something that we do. We tend to do about 10 a year. People are all invited. You can see we've got another couple coming up. So I hope you'll make note of those. And if those are interesting topics to you, you can find more information again on our website. A couple of really important in-person events that we want to highlight. Our annual meeting is coming up in less than a month in La Quinta, California. And I know many of you have been to these meetings, and I hope you'll consider coming to this one. Space is tight on the hotel, so if you're thinking about it and haven't registered, I suggest you do that soon. We have two interesting sort of sub-events as part of that this year, using the Wednesday afternoon after the main program has ended. We're having a transportation electrification planning workshop that we're delivering jointly with DOE, and as a result of a lot of the work from our electric vehicle state working group. There is also an interesting grid data sharing framework simulation, which is, again, the culmination of a bunch of work that's been done over the last couple of years. Both of these require separate registration, so you can find information about them on the agenda for the annual meeting, which you can find on NARUC's website. And the last thing I want to highlight is a very interesting and exciting two-day training on distribution system planning and resilience planning. And that will draw connections between these two maybe seemingly disparate planning activities. This is going to be delivered 3 times. It's the same training, so you can go to the one that works for you either in time or space, whatever's convenient for you. Registration for the first one coming up at the end of November is open. And this is, for those of you joining us, this is limited to our members, our friends at state energy offices, as well as consumer advocates, our NASUCA friends. So this is not a wide open public thing. This is really for our members and our friends in those other N groups. So with that, let's get to the topic. And I'm just going to sort of set the stage here a little bit before we get into hearing from the experts who you want to hear from. I'm sure most of you know IRA has lots of rebate provisions. It's a bit of an alphabet soup with acronyms, and in some cases it's an alphanumeric soup with all the different section names and references throughout the bill. These are the things that we're going to be talking about today, things that are really focused on consumer and energy efficiency and home electrification provisions. We've certainly done plenty of work on grid mod and all other kinds of provisions throughout both IRA and the Building Infrastructure Law, or IIJA. But today, this is the topic. And importantly, this money is flowing through state energy offices, and that's going to be an important part of this. We will also touch briefly on the tax credits that are related to these as well. And these, we will share these slides. Actually, they will be on our website along with a recording of this session. Thank you to Jen Amen, who you'll hear from in a little bit, for sharing this nice summary of the various home efficiency rebates and tax credits that are available. And she also provided one that focuses on the electrification and appliance rebates. So again, you can find these on our website if you want to refer to them. I think with that, I'm going to introduce Commissioner Hughes. And while I'm doing that, we're going to get a poll set up here to kind of get a sense of your knowledge of your state energy office director. The question is, do you know the name of your director of your state energy office in the state, either where you're a regulator or where you do most of your work if you're a utility or a consultant? But while you're answering, I'll introduce Commissioner Jeffrey Hughes. He's been a commissioner since 2019 and his term runs through 2025. He previously spent many years with the UNC School of Government. He was director of the Environmental Finance Center there. He has even worked briefly as a utility director for a small rural community in North Carolina. So he brings a nice diversity of background and knowledge and experience to this as our moderator. So I think, let's see how we're doing. About not quite 2-to-1, maybe 60-40 in terms of those of you who say you know your SEO director. Great. So that's homework for those of you who answered no or who were afraid to answer. Find out who the director of your state energy office is, because if this topic is important to you, that's probably somebody that you want to at least be aware of and maybe even reach out and say hi to. So Commissioner, I'll pass it over to you. Thanks very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Yes, thanks for the introduction, Jeff. Energy efficiency is a topic that our commission in North Carolina spends a lot of time with. Our focus, not surprisingly, is on utility-funded programs, but from what I hear about the amount of funds and the types of programs that are going to be supported with the IRA, it's really going to be fascinating to hear how in North Carolina and across the country we integrate and leverage these utility programs against the IRA programs to, in the end of the day, benefit our customers. We have a great panel that we're going to hear from today that represent a variety of views. And then looking at the audience list, we have a lot in the audience that represent everything from utilities to state energy officers. So you're going to have an opportunity later to ask questions for the Q&A and share your perspective. So I also encourage you to think of your questions as we go and enter them into the Q&A box. With that said, our first speaker is going to be Jennifer Amen. She is a senior fellow in ACEE's building program. Jen develops and supports strategic directions for the organization's effort to improve efficiency in homes and commercial buildings. Her current work includes a focus on scaling up deep retrofits and building decarbonization and analyzing new opportunities for energy efficiency. Then we are going to hear from Laura Scher. She is the Executive Vice President with Illume. Illume is an advising and consulting firm owned by women. And let's see, she works to advance clean energy through human-centered research and strategic advising. She has a particular interest in advancing how to best assess and reflect the impact programs are having toward achieving its goals. And lastly, we're going to hear from Rebecca Foster. She is the Chief Executive Officer for VEIC, a national clean energy implementation and consulting nonprofit. Rebecca has 12 years with VEIC, where she's worked on the technical, financial, planning, and customer perspectives of the clean energy transition. We are going to now turn it over to our three panelists, and they are going to give us their initial thoughts about this topic, and then we're going to pivot over to a Q&A session. So with that, let's turn to Jennifer.
Great, thank you so much, Commissioner Hughes. It's great to be here with folks today. So I wanted to talk a little bit, as Jeff invited us to address this issue, I wanted to focus my remarks a bit on the opportunities that we see with federal funding and coordination of this federal funding with existing or new programs offered by utilities and others to really address market transformation. Like, the really unique opportunity that we have here is an unprecedented one. So about $50 billion in investment over less than 10 years is what we're looking at in terms of the annual, the new federal funding. That doesn't include the transportation and EV provisions. And so over the course of these years, we're going to see annual funding from these programs that's really approaching current utility efficiency spending, which is about $8 billion a year. But by reaching every state, territory, tribal nation, the District of Columbia, this federal funding is going to be a unique driver for market transformation at the national level in a way that it's been a lot harder for programs to do. And so while we'll see program approaches tailored to local needs and capabilities, the overall structure and the efficiency measures supported will generate a larger and more coordinated effort than we've ever been able to achieve through our regional market transformation efforts, through sort of patchwork coordination across and among states that share interests. And we see that this is also an important driver for DOE as they look at getting this funding out, because they're requiring states and other entities to include a market transformation plan as part of their program plans for the home energy rebates, the home energy, the home electrification and appliance rebates, many of the other parts of the federal funding. But since those are what we're really focused on today, I'll be speaking mostly to those. So I think we really see some innovative activity here in the way that DOE has provided guidance on these programs. So I think there are some critical objectives that are critical to market transformation, and they're really innovative new things that many of us have been thinking about and talking about, but we haven't had federal funding so focused in these areas. So one is serving multifamily and low to moderate income households. So we know that these groups have been largely underserved by utility programs to date. And that even though there is significant utility funding directed toward the low income sector in particular, that it is short of the needs of the sector. And there's certainly the level of programming, the types of programs that have been offered, it just haven't been up to the need. We see the funding for workforce development, so important here. Really, the thing that keeps me up at night, right, is getting this workforce ready to deliver on the promise of these programs. So we have contractor and auditor training grants, other pieces of funding through the IRA and the IIJA. But these federal fundings, while a great start, more needs to be done. And I think this is a particularly great opportunity to leverage other state resources and utility support. So this will require more flexibility for utility investment and market transformation activities, rather than the emphasis on resource acquisition to cover the type of things, whether it's helping to provide training activities, quality assurance, technical assistance to contractors, and so forth. Maybe even providing funding to cover the cost of certifications, and so forth. The third is electrification. And prioritizing electrification, I think, is really important as we think about market transformation, because it's really future-proofing all of the investments that are being made and accelerating the necessary transition from fossil fuels. So utilities can consider whether to revise, expand, or initiate demand response and other load flexibility programs. I think that'll be a critical role for utilities as we move into more electrification to address those growing winter peaks in response to added load on the grid. So as we think about kind of what's the role for coordination and programs, to sort of achieve these market transformation goals. Integrating and coordinating is going to be really important to do that as much as is practical so that our programs complement each other, but also so they make it as easy as possible for customers to participate, whether they're households, businesses, institutions. We know that the specifics of any given program are going to vary by state, but in many states, utilities already have program infrastructure and relationships that the state energy offices might not have, the resources and capacity that that these programs that are really overburdening our state energy offices, could use those resources and that support to help them. And then utilities also have existing relationships with all or most of the customers in a given area, as well as trade allies and others, community-based organizations and so forth. So this coordination can take a number of forms. So one would be a blended program where existing programs might overlap with the new state energy office programs. And so that would this would combine the federal and utility funding, have a single application, a single service provider to simplify participation. I think this is something that the utilities, the state energy offices, or a third party could be the operator of that, the implementer of the program. There could be a one-stop shop model. The program could be a contractor-driven program where really contractors, particularly in states that have more mature markets, might be tasked to get out there and market the program directly to customers themselves. Or it could be a combination where the utility is working largely on upstream projects with contractors and the retailers, distributors, and manufacturers, while the state and local programs are working more closely with customers. I think if robust utility programs are in place, the state could target federal programs to underserved market segments, perhaps exceeding the minimum federal requirements for multifamily and low and moderate income participation. They could target rural areas, those served by small utilities or co-ops, or customers using delivered fuel. So that's just another opportunity where we might want to see more effort. And then finally, state and federal funding can support strong programs in many areas, and then utility investments could be reoriented toward upstream market transformation efforts, behavioral programs, benchmarking, other complementary areas that are outside of the scope of the federal programs. But to make all of this work, we really think that utilities and program administrators must work together with state energy offices now, if not already, to coordinate as the state plans are being developed to avoid duplicative efforts, streamline activities, and as much as possible minimize administrative burdens. But I wanted to just leave it by saying that we really want to hear the concerns, what your concerns, what you're most excited about, what potential solutions you're considering. And so we're reaching out now to utilities, state energy offices, and commissions, and we're going to share our findings in a forthcoming set of topic briefs. So that's just a brief plug for some work that we're doing at ACEEE. And I would love it if anybody is open to providing input in that process, please reach out to me. You'll have my contact information with the information for the webinar. And so those are my remarks, and I will turn it over to Laura. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Here we go. Forever learning how to unmute. Thank you so much for having me. And this is really an interesting conversation to be part of. I'm just really appreciative of it. I am coming to this conversation to take the lens of evaluation. And of course, as an evaluator, we have to have a couple of slides because it's just really helpful to walk through this. I want to step back for a second and just talk about, what is evaluation? Why is it we need it? And so I can frame up what does it mean in this next stage as we're thinking through collaboration and thinking through IRA funding. So evaluation and fundamentally is a mechanism for accountability and to help progress our programs moving forward. And it's been in place for many, many years. Ideally, as an evaluator, what we're looking for is to look into the policies to understand for each state what the use of the evaluation is, what the value is, what it is we're supposed to be helping our clients, who are usually either utilities or program administrators, be able to report on to show that they're doing their jobs, essentially, as well as to provide the information needed to progress. But one of the things that's really important to recognize, especially as we're moving into this interesting stage where we have all these funding sources coming together, as well as trying to progress our industry, is that the policies that have been in place for a really long time and intended to serve a different type of program model. Primarily resource acquisition, which tended to be like homes programs, which I know we're talking about today, appliance programs, which of course is part of this. But as Jen mentioned earlier, we're moving into a space where we're trying to move and transform the market. So this influx of funding, the intent is to try to very quickly, very rapidly move a market into a direction towards decarbonization, and trying to influence all the key players that are part of that. And how we think through that kind of model when we think through evaluation is actually really quite different than anything that we've been working through, or a lot of what we've been working through over the past probably 20 years or so. So I wanted to talk about just a few areas where evaluation policies need to be considered and considerations, and then talk about the things that we are thinking about within our own firm and within an evaluation industry. And I just want to note that this is all new to us. We're really thinking through this along with you all. And so there's no for sure answers here. This is really trying to get us our thinking flowing. So the first is, we want to really make sure that we're stepping back and understanding what is the purpose of what we're doing. And we do this for all programs and all evaluations. This is a fundamental piece of the work that we do and how we should be approaching our programs. But it's really even more important as we're doing things like integrating workforce development, integrating tax credits, integrating program design elements. And it's important for us all to be doing that together, whether it's from a federal level with funding going down to the state, or within a specific utility level, to make sure that we're really thinking through the important elements which feed into the metrics, and what are the important metrics then that we need to track in order to consider success. So stepping back to the metrics a little bit, because I think this is a really important piece for us to recognize as evaluators, and for you all as policymakers to really be considering. One of the rubs right now is the fact that so much of our energy efficiency programs are relying on traditional cost effectiveness tests, which were developed like as long ago as 1983, to really understand the effectiveness of programs. And in that time, that made a whole lot of sense. We were running efficiency programs for the purpose of avoiding building infrastructure. And that cost effectiveness model really allowed us to think through the value against the alternative. But now we're in a space where our intent and our goals are different than just not building a new power plant and avoiding that. Now we're thinking through the benefits of decarbonization and the value of that, the benefits and value of equity, the benefits and value of job creation. And so we really have to think about what are the metrics that we care about? Is it cost effectiveness, or are there other things that we need to be measuring and considering when we're thinking about measuring the effectiveness of the funding? The third thing I just really want to touch on is attribution. And this was a question that was raised and is being raised to us a lot from commissions and utilities alike, which is, how do we know that the money is being used wisely? Which these, what's called net to gross is kind of the mechanism for evaluation that measures that. But then even more so, how do we attribute the right credit? Like, if there's federal funding and there's utility funding and those are being stacked or braided, then where is the credit going and who deserves that? And that's something we really want to step back and think about. And I also want to challenge us to think about to what extent does the who matter? Because at the end of the day, we're using this funding together to meet a larger goal. And to be really honest, there's a lot of resources that go into this question on attribution that, you know, may be better off used in different ways than really measuring that net to gross. And finally, the last thing I just really want to hit on is the fact that partnership and the collaboration in order to achieve. And that coming back to the attribution piece, we have these separate funding sources, and as evaluators, we'll know what those are. But what we're going to want to do is see how they're interweaving to achieve a common goal. How quickly are they moving the market towards the goal that we're setting out? And can we measure that and report on that for you all? So moving to the next slide, Jeff. Here are just a few things on our thinking around evaluation and how we're approaching it. Thoughtful planning is going to be really critical, really taking the time as evaluators to integrate with you all early. I heard Jen say early, I heard her say, I think last week, maybe, or last month, but really getting in and starting to think through these issues, in particular, as you're processing the how are we doing this? How are we sharing out the funding? How are we tracking it? What are the things we need to be thinking about? So evaluators will be really helpful to work through that with you all early. Measuring and documenting from the beginning. One of the things I noticed when I started this 25 years ago, I was working before efficiency was a big thing in Wisconsin, before Focus on Energy came about. And one of the things that we felt within 5-6 years after the program started is we had a real miss in the fact that we didn't really understand the market before we even started the programs. And what that did was it disallowed us from really measuring how quickly and how impactfully the funding was to move that market, because we didn't have what was called a baseline. So we have this opportunity right now to really be able to think through those elements and set ourselves up for in the future to think about, you know, to be able to share the effectiveness of funds. Shifting from what we call a resource acquisition to a market transformation mindset. And by resource acquisition, that's like the quick incentives. Hey, you're going to purchase a central AC system. You're going to get this savings. We're going to assume that this measure, the incentive encouraged it, and we can provide to you the savings allocated to that. But market transformation, what that does is that's saying we're moving an actual market into a specific direction, and measuring the effectiveness of that takes a different type of methodology. And there's been a lot of thinking on this in the past that we can really leverage. But moving our thinking from that traditional energy efficiency acquisition to something different will be important. And finally, I just think it's really important for us to recognize that this is new. This is new for us. And it's important for us to have a growth mindset and remember that we all need to be learning and educating each other, especially as we're embarking on a really new path as an industry. So that is it for my remarks, and I will turn it over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Laura. Rebecca?
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. It's great to be here with everyone. I'm going to start with just a little bit of background about VEIC and the perspective that I'm bringing to today's webinar. VEIC is a nationally recognized clean energy nonprofit that was founded in 1986, and today we work in 24 states nationwide. We administer the Efficiency Vermont program, the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, as well as Efficiency Smart in the Midwest and in Delaware. And we also offer consulting and engineering services to advance clean energy in buildings and transportation. So you might be familiar with our work, but what most people are not familiar with is that VEIC is a regulated utility in the state of Vermont. We are not a distribution utility, so we don't manage generation or upkeep poles and wires, but we are the state's designated energy efficiency utility, and we operate under a 12-year order of appointment reporting to the Public Utility Commission. So in addition to being a regulated utility in Vermont, we also operate in many states where there are multiple program administrators, and I'm here today to bring the perspective of the administrator and share some hard-won lessons on the value of coordination. So I'll start with my key message to NARUC members, which is that meeting the needs of your constituents requires both coordination and tenacity. Coordination is required in order to serve ratepayers well. Ratepayers are not served well by setting up duplicate program infrastructure. When I say program infrastructure, what I mean are websites, customer call centers, program management systems, finance systems, evaluation systems, reporting systems. Those are all additional costs that we can avoid if we coordinate programs. And from a customer perspective, ratepayers are also not served well if they have to navigate multiple program websites, understand different qualification criteria, go through 2 or more application processes to complete projects, and seek out technical support from multiple organizations. To me, with federal funding coming down the line, a worst case scenario is really having multiple programs in the same state that are sending conflicting messages out to customers about what clean energy actions they should take. So for example, if I'm a homeowner and my utility tells me I should upgrade my appliances and add lighting controls to my home, but my state energy office tells me that I should weatherize and get a heat pump, I'm stuck and I will likely take no action at all. And I think that's a particular risk in the area of building electrification, because there are dozens of new federal programs that could be used to support electrification. From the residential rebate programs that Jennifer spoke of, to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, to funding increases for state energy plans within IIJA, as well as climate pollution reduction grants. There's a lot of emphasis on electrification and efficiency in these new programs, and so coordination is essential. We all need to be pulling in the same direction to make the most of the federal funds that will soon become available. So that's one. But tenacity is also required. And the reason that I say that is that building bridges and effective partnerships between regulators, utilities, and state energy offices is not easy. You would think, yes, all 3 groups have similar goals, but we are also used to working with our existing stakeholders, within our existing processes, on our own existing timelines. We have our own language, our own acronyms, we have our own measures of success, and breaking out of those silos is difficult. It takes time and determination to get there. So I want to share just one story from the EIC's work in Vermont that shows a potential pathway for other states to take. Efficiency Vermont was founded in 2000 and for years was the single efficiency program in the state. Then in 2015, the Vermont legislature changed the renewable portfolio standard and required the electric distribution utilities to start programs. And their programs needed to reduce the amount of fossil fuel consumed in the state. Now, there are many ways to comply with that legislation, but most of the distribution utilities chose to begin programs promoting electrification. So that resulted in both efficiency and electrification programs being in the market, and it led to customer confusion. For sure, progress on both efficiency and electrification was happening, but we program administrators were really tripping over each other. We were confused about who would get credit for the savings generated, and I would argue that we were not working as quickly or efficiently as ratepayers deserved. So in 2018, the EIC and the utilities came together to map out what would coordinating programs really take. And our realization was that we both serve the same customer, and our goal was to come up with a way of collaborating where 1 + 1 would equal 3. So we mapped out the areas where our programs overlapped, where Efficiency Vermont could legitimately claim efficiency savings from work, and where utilities could claim fossil fuel reductions. And we settled on heat pumps as being really the focus of our collaborative efforts. And then we laid out the steps in designing and administering those heat pump programs. And we identified which ones Efficiency Vermont could most effectively deliver and which ones the distribution utilities could most effectively deliver. So together, we agreed Efficiency Vermont should do things that were uniquely suited to a statewide program. Things like setting efficiency specifications, creating a qualified products list, developing the workforce statewide, and using our online rebate center and our finance team to process not just our own rebates, but all of the distribution utility rebates as well, because it just didn't make sense for all of the utilities in the state to set up that duplicate infrastructure. And we also agreed that the utilities should do things that they were uniquely suited to do, including customer outreach and education through their account management teams, communication through utility bills, and the system-wide planning that was going to be needed to take on and manage these new electric loads over time. We also agreed to bring our account management teams together so they could share project leads and to train our customer support staff so they could answer the public's questions about all the state's programs regardless of which company the customer called. And this is a really critical concept from social services that I want to make sure is inserted into our work here. It's called ensuring that every door opens. As we see these federal funds flow, as we know very successful efficiency programs will continue to operate, we need to be sure that every door opens for customers and we are maximizing the benefit that we get from these federal dollars. So as a result of this work, Vermont's heat pump installations have grown 10x from 2015 to 2022, and we now have the second highest market penetration for heat pumps in the country. And given the history of working collaboratively across programs, we've been able to help the state deploy federal funding that it's received so far. So for example, VEIC just launched new programs in September to help households and businesses impacted by the summer's flooding, helping them recover by completing weatherization projects and getting new heating systems installed that are more efficient, will cost less to operate over time. We're also in the process of launching new programs to promote heat pump water heaters and support electric panel upgrades to be an enabling factor for electrification. All of those programs are funded with federal funding that has flowed through the State Energy Office and partners with the utility programs and Efficiency Vermont on deployment. So in closing, I would just say we believe at VEIC we have found a model that really works. As Jennifer noted, it starts up front with a lot of discussion and collaboration, not just 2 months ago, but 6 months ago, a year ago. These efforts take a long time to come to fruition. So I would encourage the regulators listening today to consider this model, but also to bring tenacity to your drive for improved coordination over the coming months. You play a critical role in ensuring that all clean energy programs are effectively achieving the outcomes that ratepayers need. And that's true whether those programs are funded by ratepayers or funded through the federal government and state energy offices. So thank you all, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Rebecca and Jennifer and Laura. I think now we're going to turn to an open Q&A. We have a few coming in from the Q&A box, and then I have some that I'm going to ask. But I'm going to start with what seems to be a theme with the questions we're getting, and it's specific examples. And Rebecca, you laid out some really nice specific examples. I just wanted to know if Jennifer and Laura, you had any other specific kind of examples of both, I guess, failure and success. And it's not like we haven't had programs outside of utility-funded programs in the past. We've had, at times, quite a bit of money coming in through our weatherization program. So, what have we learned from that? Have we learned what to do and what not to do? Maybe Laura, if you want to take a crack at that.
Gosh, it's a really great question. One of the things that I think about, well, there's two examples of areas that we've really approached this in the past. One, as you mentioned, Commissioner, which is how do we integrate and think through the weatherization program and utility funded programs. And one of the things that we've seen has been really important, and it goes all down to this collaboration space, right? Because we have different objectives as organizations. The federal government's going to have a different objective than the utility, which has a different objective than the CAP agency, et cetera. And one of the things that I have found to be really important is making sure the systems align enough to be able to reduce the burden of those different systems to make sure everyone's meeting their objectives. So, for example, working with the lead agencies for weatherization programs to align data needs is one example. Are we able to make sure that it's consistent, that we're not requiring multiple different data sources coming through that's going to different places, and that we're really coordinating on those needs and asks early? So that's just one example of a place that I've seen this really succeed and really with some programs, and then honestly really fail with others, meaning if it's not there from an evaluation perspective, it's challenging, but also from the utility, state energy office, getting the right reports, that can be a real challenge. The only other thing I'll note, because this question has come to us a couple of times, is the comparison between this and ARA funding in the past and what that looks like for evaluation and program administration. And I just wanted to mention that because this feels really quite different than that. In that moment, there was just a ton of funding that came out, a lot of appliances, no model whatsoever for how to deal with evaluation at that point, a lot of questions, a lot of this. And at the end of the day, there was a ton of money that was spent to no end without any real answers. And so that to me feels, that's why it was so important early on to say, well, let's step back and think about what we're doing and why we're doing it, because we don't want that to happen. We want to be able to go in with everyone having the right expectations, and so that whatever comes out of our work can be valuable. So I hope that answers the question for the requester.
I think that was a great answer. Jennifer, do you have anything you want to add? Good.
Yeah, no, I think we can move on. That's a great answer.
All right. Well, so state energy offices and utilities are only two of the many organizations likely to be involved in distributing EE funds. I think, we've talked a lot about them so far. But what are some of the other organizations that you think need to be at the so-called coordination table, and what's the process for doing that, and any experience with that? Rebecca, you want to take that?
Sure, I'll just jump in here. I think you just mentioned a moment ago, one of the most important partners that VEIC has found is weatherization agencies. So, what I like to encourage is states, whether that's from the utility perspective, the commission perspective, or the state energy office perspective, to scan, who are the other entities, the other program providers that are interacting with our target audience, whether that's residential or commercial customers, on energy issues, and see who rises to the top. So that may be weatherization agencies, and I have some examples of how we've partnered with those in the past. But there also may be others in a given territory that rise to prominence as well. So housing organizations come to mind, workforce development organizations come to mind. So I would strongly recommend beginning with a landscape analysis to understand, who are the entities in a given jurisdiction that are active with, homeowners, building owners, operators, the engineering crews that you need to influence, and then really do a good bit of outreach to understand what their activities are, how they're interacting with your targets, and how you can bring additional resources to bear to improve program delivery for everyone. So the example there, again, from our work in Vermont, is working with weatherization agencies to ensure that when they go into customers' homes and they are delivering federal weatherization programming focused on reducing heating burden, and they're improving the building envelope, and they're doing air sealing and insulation, that they are also funded by Efficiency Vermont, improving the electric performance of a home by installing more efficient appliances, more efficient lighting, and other electric savings measures, so that the customer truly gets a full package. They don't have to worry about going to two providers. Again, every door opens. You can get the services that you need. You can get the benefits that you need from one entity. And then we, on the back end, work with the weatherization providers to deal with payment and compensation and tracking and reporting and savings claims. So we've done that level of partnership to make it very easy to reach, hard to reach customer segment. And I would encourage all of the attendees today to really start with that landscape scan, and then look for those wins where we have many programs or different agencies, different providers, different constituents going into homes and buildings across their states to find the ways to piggyback services and reduce costs for everyone.
I could add a couple of groups I think that are important that we think about as well. So the contractor community is really critical. They're the ones that are going to be in people's homes actually delivering the services. And they've also participated in programs. So they have a good idea of what works and what doesn't. They might know how we could streamline things, what have been some of the challenges or hiccups that they faced in participating in programs in the past. And the other thing that I think is going to be really important, particularly with the level of the rebates in the HERE program, the electrification and appliance rebates, we really want to be working with the contractors to make sure that they're not just going in and delivering whatever low-hanging fruit or whatever matches their capabilities, that they aren't just going in to do, um, um, you know, heat pump water heater. Maybe they can do that without replacing the panel, but this would be a great opportunity for them to, connect with the program, to bring in an electrician to do that work. Or, and since this is something that's point of sale, in many cases, customers may be reaching out to these folks directly. So we really want to make sure that we've brought them in from the beginning so they understand, what the programs are all about, what all the benefits are, and how it can help their business for them to participate and provide that added service to customers. The second one is the community-based organizations, so that we can really figure out how we can tie in what we're bringing to the table to the other community needs that can also be addressed through our programs. Affordability, resilience in the community, and health and safety benefits. So really bringing them in and making sure that they're bought in, and that they're so important for reaching these audiences that have been hard for us to reach. They're a trusted entity. They know how their communities work and can really help us reach the folks we need to reach.
Right. I just want to +1 all of you, especially Jennifer, the contract and network that was in my brain, and just pulling it back to the community piece really briefly, which is just a reminder that as part of this, and Justice 40 is this real intentionality for serving disadvantaged communities, which still we have to yet to see how that looks, and having that voice and understanding some of the challenges within those communities will be really important, and how to invite them into the process.
Great, thank you all very, very much. We have one participant that wants to hear a little bit more about how they might go about with the attribution challenge. And you talked about it being quite important. Laura, do you have any initial ideas that you want to float, or any specific suggestions for a state that's just getting started with that?
It's a really good question. I think one of the things that's important is to think through the use and the value, the use of the attribution analysis, and why are we doing it? So first, stepping back and thinking about, how do you hope to apply it? Some states are doing it for performance incentive mechanisms, or to be able to show the savings that are being claimed. Others are doing it in order to just really inform the market itself and be able to see how the market's shifting. So I really want to encourage us to start with that. The second thing I think that is important is that there are a lot of existing best practices out there around attribution, net to gross analysis. The important piece right now is making sure we're disentangling and understanding where and when we need to disentangle the multiple funding that's in there, and kind of going back to that program design piece and the pieces of it, making sure we're really understanding the components that are affecting people's decisions. Because at this point, it's getting complicated. We're trying to measure the different components of a program that's influencing customers, and whether it's federal funding coming in, whether it's a tax credit, whether it's a contractor coming through, there are lots of different pieces there that can drive a market. And just being super thoughtful and recognizing that in our approach, I think is really important. So I don't know if that is a specific enough answer, but in the few minutes we have, I really hate to go too far in the weeds on this, but that's just my high level response to that, and happy to address any other questions on it.
Well, I like that you really said start out with your purpose and your framework, and you mentioned, if you're a state or a program that follows performance measures, that might drive a different type of attribution. If it's simply for accounting purposes, or for showing meeting a statewide goal, it could be different. And I think that's just one of many ways that state energy efficiency programs, utility funded state energy efficiency programs, are different across the country. Rebecca, you come from a model where it's a quote even though you're a utility, you're a third-party utility. You know, you're one step away from the utility that reads the meter. You know, we have states where it's strictly utility-funded programs, and we have states like yours and others across the country that have this third-party entity. Do we have to think about coordination differently in these different models? And you know, I think it's probably too ambitious to think we're going to change the model in the time that we need. So we're kind of stuck with what we have. So what do you suggest for folks that have these different models?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a couple of states right now that are in the process of considering moving to a different model, and that is an ambitious undertaking and one that can yield benefits, but also has drawbacks. So I'll be really clear about that. I think the question of how different administrative models might impact coordination, I think is a good one. I think an even better question is, how do the rules of the road in different states, regardless of the administrator, impact coordination? And I think that's actually more important to focus on. And I believe, you know, both Laura and Jennifer mentioned some of these existing components of the efficiency program paradigm, like cost effectiveness tests that have been with us since the early 80s, have worked well for decades. And now they are starting to see some strain. And so I think if we see states across the country with very strict interpretations of what is a cost and what is a benefit, very narrow definitions of what is a cost and what is a benefit, and if we see those programs in those states being close to the line of being cost effective already, it's unlikely that those states are going to be able to devote the time and resources really needed to do the type of coordination we've all been talking about to yield the best program outcomes for their ratepayers and their customers. So that's really what I spend a lot of time thinking about, not necessarily the administrative model at play, but how much room do the existing utility programs have to work with? Is there some cushion? And at BEIC, we focus deeply on equity. So we see this all the time, where reaching underserved communities takes longer. It's harder work. Engaging with community-based organizations is so worthwhile, and trust does not come quickly, right? This is part of starting early and being, very diligent and deliberate and not giving up, because you have to come to the table again and again and again to get to relationships that can really result in the benefits coming to specific communities. I think the same is true here. We have to come to the table again and again and again. And do our cost effectiveness tests give us the room to really engage in that way? I would argue in some of the states where BEIC works, there is not that room, and we're going to be really strained and constrained as a result. So that's kind of my quick answer to that is we should all be looking, as Laura suggested, more closely at those cost effectiveness tests now and in the future, as we think about how the efficiency program community and paradigm needs to shift.
I really appreciate all this talk about the cost effectiveness test. Every time you any of you have mentioned, a commission should do this, or more accurately, a utility should fund this, I've been rolling it through our current cost effectiveness test to just think about roughly how it would score. And I think North Carolina historically, we've approached low income programs in particular with a different kind of cost effectiveness lens. So there's some differences without going into the details, but some of the things, particularly you, Jennifer, that suggested would be good for a utility funded program, like things that are more training and market transformation. They're not going to score. They're not going to score really, really well. I don't think in our current utility cost test. So I think that's going to be a point that a lot of commissions are going to struggle with. Let's see, and please, audience, we have a few more time for questions. Let's see if any more have come in. Nope, I think no more audience questions. Well, I have another question, and some of you have hinted at it with referencing some types of measures. But if a commission wants to start easy, what's the low-hanging fruit for some of these different measures? I mean, we have everything from behavioral programs to household audits to rebates. and then rebates for a lot of different things. What's one that, you know, absolutely we should be focused on and that is kind of within our grasp, if that makes sense? Low-hanging fruit.
Well, I think that's a really hard question, right? Like, I think, you know, depending on what day you asked me or what, you know, where we were, because I think, you know, it could be answered in different ways, right? Like, it's sort of, you know, what does the customer need is kind of the, you know, because that's what's going to get your foot in the door and get you started to working with them. So that might, you know, so in some cases that's the response. In other cases, you know, I think, you know, the low hanging fruit is air sealing and insulation, because we know that our envelopes are underperforming in almost all markets. And that's a key driver of, you know, comfort issues that will bring people to the table, as well as, you know, energy waste. It's something people don't see, they don't think about as much. And it's going to be really critical as we electrify to make sure that we have good envelopes so people can afford electrification and so that our grid can operate with increasing electric loads. So I think it's, you know, it's a really tough question. And I think from a utility standpoint, one of the things that's challenging is for some of the changes we're trying to make, we do have things that we've mentioned again and again, like panel upgrades that are necessary. And that's not something that's necessarily, you know, going to fit into the cost test or the utility program, since it's not an energy saver of its own. So I think, you know, that's definitely not a low hanging fruit, but I think, you know, we have to think about these in combination. And for some of the federal rebates, we really do have to think about them in combination, because we are looking at comprehensive projects to meet savings targets that trigger the rebate. So in that case, it's, you know, how do you combine measures? And some of that will be dictated by your climate region.
I would just add, I agree with everything that Jennifer said. And my additional answer is the place to get started is the place where you can find overlapping interests across the kind of commissioners, the utilities, and the state energy offices, and the community-based organizations, if you can get them to that table too. So the place to get started is wherever you can get traction, because the work is hard and you need some quick wins in order to keep going.
Great. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I think we have time for my last question is at a conference, you get in the elevator with a commissioner or a regulator, and you got about 10-15 seconds to give them your spiel about what they should be doing to push this coordination along. So what's your really quick elevator kind of final remarks? What do you want to leave everybody with? And I'll start with Rebecca. I'll start with you.
Oh my goodness, that's such a high pressure situation. Start at a human level, start at a personal level, get coffee, talk about what's coming, build a relationship, and go from there.
Okay. Learn their name. That might be a good start for the 40% that
Exactly.
Number one.
Yeah.
All right, Jennifer, anything for you?
Well, just kind of following on that theme, you know, I think, and taking us back full circle, do they know the state energy office director? And if not, offer to make an introduction. All
right, another vote for personal. Laura, your last word.
All right. Understand the blocking points and try to think a little bit creatively and not so the same as we always have, which means that we just have to bring lots of different thoughts and opinions to the table.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. As one commissioner, I thank you for both your extended insights and then your last mark. You know, trying to be creative as a commissioner, it's something that we try, but you know, we have some structural problems about being too creative, given what our responsibilities are. Jeff, do you have any final remarks that you want to say?
Thanks, Commissioner. Mostly, I want to thank you and thank the panelists for the fantastic information, and I love the optimism and the forward-looking excitement about this that all of you portrayed. And I think we at NARUC feel that, and we hope that, particularly for our members who are out there, if you think of things that we can do to help advance this conversation even more, please let us know. We want to give you the resources that you need and that you want to see. So if anything you heard here today makes you think, gee, I wish I could have X, please let us know. That's why we're here. So I hope if you get a chance and meet any of these folks in person, you'll thank them for their outstanding presentations today. And again, Commissioner, thank you very much for your great moderation. Really appreciate everybody jumping in, some of you fairly last minute. So that's very much appreciated. And we look forward to seeing all of you at other NARUC events, whether online or in person. Have a good rest of your day, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.